people file in here. And I'll just give it a moment before I do our tech intros, and then I'll hand it off.
All right, so Anne said she's going to register as an attendee.
Okay.
We'll see.
Promoting.
Yes.
All right, so I think we are expecting more, but I'll make sure I type this all out for those that are coming in a bit later. But hello and welcome to the second user group for Edge. Before we get started, just in case it's your first time joining us, this is Zoom webinar, not Zoom meeting. So your cameras and microphones are going to be disabled by default. So if you want to interact with the panelists, rather, you're going to want to use either the chat or Q&A. For any actual question related to Edge or something that the panelists are talking about, we're going to prefer you use Q&A. It's much easier for us to manage and make sure that we can get to as many questions as possible. But for general commentary or discussion, chat is totally fine. Just make sure that you select all panelists and attendees from the dropdown. Otherwise, only the panelists will be able to see what you've written. So without further ado, I want to hand it off to Melanie Gottlieb.
Thanks so much, Mike. Good afternoon and happy Tuesday. I'm Melanie Gottlieb, Deputy Director of ACRO, and I'd like to welcome you to the second of our monthly virtual Edge user groups. We know that everyone is incredibly busy at this time, and so we thank you for joining us, and we hope that you will find this session useful. As always, we are hopeful that our technology will not fail us. It's a fairly large Zoom, and we at ACRO, like many of you, remain working from home at the mercies of our home Wi-Fi. And so we occasionally have a technical bump, but we just power through it. We missed the opportunity to engage with all of you in our at our ACRO annual meeting in person this year. As Mike said, you can use the chat freely during this webinar. If you have a question for a specific panelist, please be sure to use the Q&A and add that into the Q&A section, identifying the panelist if it is a specific for them. So joining me today is Jasmine Saidi Kunert, and I will let her introduce herself and the members of the IESC who have joined. Jasmine?
Thank you. Thanks, Melanie, and good morning, good afternoon from Los Angeles, California. And it's lovely to be here with you again. And I'm here today joined by a few members of the International Education Standards Council. I have with me Robert Watkins, who represents University of Texas, Austin, Nancy Katz, who represents the International Evaluation Service, and I believe Dale Goff with Foreign Credential FCSA in Austin, Texas. And we may have Ann Koenig joining us, and she is our ACRO representative. There are several other members on the IASC, but today we're fortunate to have the following people that I just introduced. So welcome, and we're here again once every month to share with you what we've been up to.
All right. Mike, can you forward to the next slide?
So this is the group. You'll see Johnny Johnson, who is retired. He used to be with the Monterey Peninsula College, and he's our representative from the community college. We have, again, Nancy Katz. Then we have Jen Minke, who is with the Texas, what is it, Texas Community College? Tarrant County Community College in Texas. We have Emily Say with IERF. There's Robert Watkins, and we have Bill Paver with FCSA.
So I would just like, at our last user group meeting, we went over all of the Edge new features. And so I'm just going to remind you what those are Later in the Q&A, if you'd like us to share screen and go over one of those features in particular, we're happy to do that. But I want to point out that the new Edge has a new interface with responsive design, that we have opened our country overviews to non-subscribers. And so if you need to share country information, not placement recommendations or grading scales, but country-specific information, you can share those overviews with your colleagues on campus without a subscription. We've integrated our Acro Connect news and events that are related to international, and you'll see those at the bottom of the screen. And the most exciting to me are the personal account bookmarks, the country update alerts, and the emergent news alerts. We've also upgraded our search functionality so that you can find credentials a lot more easily rather than scrolling through multiple pages to find them. So what I'd like to do before we jump into a few of the more in-depth, I'd like to take a short poll. So Mike, if you could launch the first poll. I'm just wondering who's here. What part of the field do you represent, and are you an Edge subscriber?
And apologies, I did not queue up the Jeopardy theme for the.
Oh, but I completely forgot about that. That's all right.
Maybe if for our second one, maybe I will.
All right.
All right, I'll give this another 10 seconds before I close it out.
Perfect, thanks. And we're going to go right into the next question as well, because I just want to take a quick poll to see the new features that we introduced at the last one. So we've got mostly Edge subscribers and mostly institution-based staff and a few professional evaluators. For those of you who are not Edge subscribers, if you are interested in a trial subscription of Edge to see what the fuss is about, you can email edge@acro.org and Drew will be happy to help you out. If you can launch the second poll, Mike. And I would say we can I probably should have combined these so it would be faster. I will do that for the next one. And this is about the emergent news feature. And it still looks like most people have not viewed the emergent news feature. And so that will, if we have time in the Q&A, maybe I will show that feature really quickly to see. And maybe share the next poll also, Mike.
Sure. Oops. Stop share. There we go.
And how about the bookmarks feature? Looks like a few people are starting to take advantage of the bookmarks. And so I will say that for those of you who have, say, specific countries that are your feeder countries for our institution-based people, I might suggest you go into Edge and you bookmark those countries that are your main feeder institutions, so that if we get an update that applies to your country, whether that be a content update or an emergent news alert, that every time you log into Edge, if there's something new, you will be notified about that. And so it's a really great feature, and I think could be very handy for those of you who deal with, say, maybe in general, 10 countries or so as your main population. All right, and then Mike, if you could launch the user group attendance question. And I'm just curious, is this the first user group you've attended, or were you here last month? Okay. So more than half of you were not here last month. So that's great. Welcome. We're glad to have you. I hope that you find it useful. Our intention in these user groups is to have a user group every month. Starting in January, they will be on the third Thursday of the month. But unfortunately, in the fall, The third Thursday is a little problematic. And so we had to play with the dates a little bit for October and November. We will skip December because frankly, everyone's too busy in December. It just gets really crazy. And suddenly it's the end of the year and the winter break. So we will have one more user group in 2020, and that will be next month. You'll see that date on, I believe it's the 24th, but you'll see it on a future slide. And then we'll start up again in January. All right. I think we can close this and go to the next slide. So, and I'm going to turn it over to Jasmine, who's going to start us off in talking about what has the IESC been doing in the last month and what are some of the highlights of the discussions.
All right. Thanks, Melanie. Well, for many of you, if you're not familiar with the IESC, we meet once every 2 weeks for an hour. We have a Zoom call and we have a working agenda filled with items that have been brought to our attention by EDGE users, as well as just the work that we do in trying to keep the information on the countries and credentials up to date. We also meet once a year in person, but because of the current pandemic situation, like everybody else, we rescheduled and we met virtually, and we turned our person-to-person, face-to-face 2-day meeting into a 2-day Zoom meeting of about 3 hours each, and we managed to get through a lot of the items on the agenda. But for example, some of the issues that we deal with are the topics that we just can't seem to reach a resolution on. So when we have our annual meeting, this is where we roll up the sleeves and we sit down and we really dive deep into a particular credential or a particular country's education system. One of the topics that you'll be seeing posted shortly, I believe sometime in December, would be update on the education system of Uzbekistan. And Koenig has done extensive research on this, and we have assessed the credentials and approved the credential advice. So you will see a country profile update as well as credential information. So look forward to seeing this being posted in December. But some of the other topics that are still works in progress, we haven't completely come up with a consensus, will be, let's say, the country of Cameroon, where we have a bifurcated education system, an Anglophone and Francophone, and I will let Robert kind of give you our dilemmas and our conversations on this topic. We also have the issue about 3-year nursing diplomas from Nepal. Maybe Nancy, you could kind of dive in for us on that as to how we've made progress. The other one would be the Democratic Republic of Congo. This is a diplôme d'ingénieur, which we have reached a consensus, and that information has been updated or will be updated on EDGE. And Robert, maybe you can touch on that. So let's start with Cameroon.
Good. I wasn't sure if I was still muted or not. Sure. Basically, the situation in Cameroon, you sort of set the stage, Jasmine, by pointing out to folks that it's a bifurcated system, both Anglophone and Francophone. It's actually uneven. The English-speaking population in the Anglophone system are somewhat going away, it appears, as part of ethnic strife and so forth. But we still have the situation for the moment. And the problem in Cameroon EDGE credential advice at the moment is that the Anglophone system that results in GCE A levels, now they're overseen by the Cameroonian secondary board, but they are much like British A levels. And we suggest giving up to a year's credit like we do with the UK A levels. And then the subsequent 3-year bachelor's degree, which is what one gets from 2 universities in Cameroon, University Buea and University Bamenda, is considered comparable to a US bachelor's degree, fully comparable, because like the UK, it's a 13 plus 3 situation. Now over on the Francophone side, we have a little bit different situation. the Francophone system culminates with the baccalaureate, like it does in France. But unlike France and Cameroon, it's 13 years, whereas in France, it's only 12. And so we don't recommend credit for the baccalaureate in France, EDGE, and in Cameroon, we do not either, even though it's a longer primary secondary system. Although we're tinkering with that a little bit to make sure that that 13 years is a full 13 years. That's one of the issues we're working on. But finally, the 3-year licence, which follows that baccalaureate, is not being given US bachelor's comparability, unlike the Anglophone bachelor, even though they're even insofar as number of years are concerned. And that sort of bothers me, the inconsistency, the unfairness. And so I raised the issue, but we're still grappling with it.
Thanks, Robert. And you're right, we're grappling with it because we've even reached out to colleagues in Canada to see how they will interpret this. And it's kind of all over the map, isn't it? Where some countries or some institutions may look at the baccalaureate and the licence as comparable to a US bachelor's degree, but we've also found that some are not looking at the baccalaureate as anything beyond completion of secondary school. So that 1 year of advanced standing credit is up for debate still. And we're open to any feedback from some of our EDGE users who may have access to information, practices of some other universities as to how they have been admitting students from Cameroon who have the baccalaureate examination. Any other additions to this? Nancy, do you have anything you wish to add?
And Cameroon, no.
No. Okay. How about Nepal? This has been our other issue that we've been grappling with.
Right. We recently received a question about nursing diplomas in Nepal. And we've been doing some research, some historical research, as well as what is going on currently. They do have a 3-year nursing diploma as well as a 3-year post diploma, and dealing with the entrance requirements into the program. Where does it lead? It appears they may also be changing their nursing education within Nepal. So we've been doing some research, primarily Ann Koenig, and she's also looking at how this relates to parallel systems, especially in the region. And then we will get back to the individual that asked the question. We take these questions very seriously. We have debates about them. We really do look at it from a historical perspective, as well as what's going on currently and what is being done within the field as well.
Thank you. That's correct, Nancy. So your questions, as they come up, they become part of our agenda item. If they're not easily answered, you know, when your when your query comes in, we do take them very seriously, and then we put them on the list, and that's when the actual research begins. The next country that we tackled, and Robert did the research and presented his advice, which was approved and will be posted, is the Democratic Republic of Congo, and this had to do with the engineering diploma. Robert?
Sure. Yeah, that one was fairly simple. First, a tiny bit of background. EDGE was rolled out in the middle of the first decade of this century in rather rapid fashion. We were under the gun to get this thing out and rolling. And so there were some corners that were cut. And sometimes we got perhaps a little lazy. We also had multiple authors. We got a little lazy and thought we could jam a bunch of, just do generic benchmark credentials and get away with not having to list every single one. As time has gone by, we've seen the folly of that. And we've begun to sort of intensify and flesh out a lot more of these, especially those that we think you guys, the users, tend to see more than others. This is not necessarily true of Democratic Republic of Congo, but it did seem like when the issue was raised by a user that we talk about the licence diploma, we don't mention the engineering diploma, because even though they're sort of parallel, the engineers get an actual title and they don't get a licence. And so we said, that makes sense. We ought to give it its own separate entry. But it turns out to be very much like the licence, where it follows 2 years after the gradué, which is the first 3-year degree after high school diploma in DRC. And same with the diplôme d'ingénieur, which is a 2-year degree in engineering after the gradué diploma, so a 3+2. We then gave it US bachelor's comparability, just as we did with the licence. Some might say, well, it's 5 years, why not a master's degree? But there are higher degrees that would, in our estimation, equate to a US master's degree. So again, a simple fix to sort of pull that diplôme d'ingénieur out of the generic second degree category, second diploma category, and make it its own credential entry, which makes it a little easier for the user to find and understand.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And I just wanted to say that 2 of our colleagues who weren't able to make it on the Zoom video part are now here on the audio portion, and that's Dale Goff and Ann Koenig. So thank you, and glad that we have them both on the call. Another country that has come up, and we have been really trying to pull all of our resources together, is Myanmar. And this is a country that, unfortunately, information is not as prolific as we would like it to be. We are doing our best to bring about the information, because there is conflicting data that says perhaps the secondary system is 11 years versus what we have been informed on as being 10 years. We also have debates over the length of the medical degree program. We have seen that it is listed as, in some places, as 6.5 years, and then in some other instances, we've seen it as 5 years. So this is also another heated topic of discussion amongst us, and we haven't yet come up with a resolution. We have members on the IASC that have taken on the responsibility to do extensive research. We welcome anyone who is attending this web chat today, that if you have any connections or you already have information on Myanmar, we would really welcome you sharing that with us. I'd like to maybe allow Anne to share with us her perspective on Myanmar, and maybe Robert, we could have a little bit of a glimpse as to what we've been discussing on the ISC. Anne?
Hi, everyone. Yes, hi, it's Ann Koenig speaking. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my Zoom today, so I'm only on the phone. I'm not yet ready to give any words of wisdom about Myanmar. I'm still researching it and finding interesting information, but nothing conclusive yet. That's my view right now.
Thank you. Robert?
Yes, the smarter part of me says agree with Anne, but I'm going to go ahead and just put out a little bit, just a little bit of a hint as to where the problem in the debate lies for our users, and that is Myanmar has a 10-year primary secondary system. After that, one goes on to university or some other form of post-secondary education if possible. There is no 12-year system like in much of the rest of the country. Some of the things we grapple with are, while in EDGE we tend to be year counters at the post-secondary level, that is to say in terms of first degrees and subsequent degrees and so on, we tend to be benchmarkers a little bit more at the secondary level, the upper secondary level. By that I mean, we don't seem to be bothered too much by an 11-year primary secondary system, such as Venezuela, such as Peru, such as GCSEs in the UK, if that's what you use or allowed for freshman admission. So what's wrong with 10? True, we don't have any 10-year systems anymore except for Turkmenistan. Russia did away with it. It's almost 20 years ago. The Philippines has just gotten rid of their 10-year and replaced it with 12. So really Myanmar is kind of by itself out there. The practice that I disagree with is I will not quibble over what to do with a high school diploma from Myanmar. You can admit them as a freshman or not, as you see fit. My problem is with subsequent degrees after that, having years sort of, I call it soaked off to make up for 11 and 12, and therefore taking a 5-year subsequent first degree, like in medicine, if it's as little as that, maybe, as Jasmine said, 6.5. We'll find out soon. Anyway, suddenly making it a 3-year degree and saying it's not comparable. That was what we were faced with at UT Austin, an MBBS, a medical degree. And I went ahead and instructed my people to call it a bachelor's degree and let them be considered for graduate school. So there's a taste of what we're trying to grapple with in respect to Myanmar. Jasmine, back to you.
Thank you. So yes, and it is, as I said, a work in progress. And again, I invite anyone who is joining us on today's webinar to share with us any up-to-date information you may have, or an email to a source. This is a country that is not as, I guess, easily accessible to collect information. So we're also using our contacts at the UK ENIC NERIC. This is a UK had a relationship with Myanmar historically, so they do see more students from the region than we do. And we're also reaching out to colleagues in Australia as well. So geographically, they also receive students from there. But you know, our focus isn't so much on countries that receive the most students. We just like to look at every country that we think needs to have an updated profile and a deeper dive into their credentials. I'd like to also maybe have a little update for you on the work that our fellows are doing as they're part of their research project who serve on IESC. Every year we select 2 candidates who have applied to be a fellow of the IESC. And these are individuals who are starting in the profession, and they're very interested in becoming more active in the field of international education. And so by joining the IESC, this is a great opportunity. We will have a webinar on this, the IESC fellows, the past project and the current project this coming November. But I do have the 2 mentors on the team right now, Nancy Katz and Dale, and perhaps either one of you could give us a little taste of what the current project is that our 2 fellows are engaged in.
Dale, would you like to give a brief summary?
Sure. The research has been completed. It's been quite extensive. I've been looking at this topic for a number of years, and the 2 fellows found more schools than I had ever heard of.
I'm going to interrupt you real quick, Dale. What is the topic?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, it's the offshore medical school located in the Caribbean area, and by offshore I mean those medical programs that are like U.S. medical programs, in that they are requiring a bachelor's degree for admission purposes. But these are schools that are not accredited in the U.S. or by any U.S. accreditor. And so it presents a problem in terms of when somebody applies for admission for other degrees or for licensure. The question that is always asked is, did you attend an accredited school? Well, no, these are not accredited schools. The Caribbean countries have gotten together and decided that there is one organization, CAAMHP, that they will recognize as their regional accreditor for medical schools, for the health professions, actually. And so the chart that the 2 fellows have come up with will reflect those schools that have some accreditation status, the CAAMHP or some others. We're getting a lot of interest from the medical boards. So I think this study is going to be much more wide-ranging than we had initially thought it would be. So right now they're going through some refinement of the research that they found in terms of the chart. And hopefully you'll see it soon as probably a white paper attached to EDGE.
Thank you, Dale. And this is going to be a very helpful, valuable resource. I read an article recently that with the COVID pandemic, the rise of health profession applications has increased. There's a need for more health professionals to be hired here in the United States. And there's also this demand that more people want to pursue degrees in this. And pursuing a degree in the medical field is not as easy here in the United States. So there are these alternative options. And we have seen individuals who go from, whether it's from the US or other countries, to some of these schools in the Caribbean, some of which are accredited, some of which are not. And I believe this list that our fellows are producing under the direction of Nancy and Dale will prove to be a very helpful resource. Well, that kind of brings us kind of a quick wrap up of what we've been up to, and every month we'll have more news for you. So I think I'd like to just leave this back to you, Melanie, and our attendees for their questions.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Jasmine. And thanks for all of you on the IESC, which I apologize. We weren't clear. We did a little bit of shortcutting. The IESC is the International Education Standards Council. And it is the council that that does the research and makes the placement recommendations for EDGE. And so it is made up of the individuals that you saw in the previous slide, and it represents a pretty broad crosscut of the field, which helps us to bring a consensus opinion in EDGE for US institutions. Is there anything you want to add to that, Jasmine, or was that okay?
That's perfect. And, you know, we also work very closely with the ACRO office, with your team of evaluators, and your representative on our council is Ann Koenig. So she brings, you know, we try with our efforts are so that we don't, we remain consistent even with what the ACRO team is doing. So we don't want to be saying one thing and the ACRO team is doing something else. So we do have this great communication, and we also have our communication with IPAC, which is the publications division. So we work in unison, and that's, I mean, that's my motto: to work in unison and some uniformity in our field is very essential.
Yeah, I think I would add to that, Jasmine, that I think over the past decade, I've seen more and more consensus and more collaboration, and that's pretty exciting to see.
Yeah, I share that sentiment.
So I'd like to turn to some questions that some folks have asked. And so I'm going to start with a question to bring it back to Cameroon for a minute. So I'm probably going to end up punting this to you, Robert. But I have a question from Todd Colvard, who's asking, in Cameroon, are there differences in the recognition of baccalaureate versus A levels and 3-year licence versus 3-year bachelor's degree, especially with the licence v bachelor's? Will both lead to admission to graduate study?
Todd, that's a great question. And that's one that obviously was one that we grappled with as well, simply because first order of business is to find out what's going on in country. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to dictate what we ultimately decide, but it is important to know, is the upward mobility between the licence holder and the bachelor holder in country the same? And that's, you know, and we also want to get out of the way politics and ethnic strife, which is going on right now, and so forth, rivalry and such like that, and get down to just brass tacks. Can someone access the next level degree at a university in Cameroon with either of those credentials? And if the answer is yes, that's a major step towards saying, shouldn't we be treating them the same? Again, it's not the final answer. So then we want to go in and dig and more intrinsically find out what's undergirding these two degrees, this bachelor and this licence. We see that they're 13 years, we think. Let's verify that for one thing. In fact, I've seen some sources that have made it seem like the Anglophone side leading to A-levels and bachelors is 14 years from grade 1, which is rather odd to me. But that it does appear that the Francophone system is 13 years. We want to make sure that grade 1 is indeed a true sort of US style grade 1 and not a kindergarten type situation. And then we move up the ladder and try to see the internal merits of the subsequent education that takes place, so that we can say, they really are the same. Why aren't we treating them the same? So that's kind of what we're doing with it at the moment.
Thanks so much, Robert, for that. Another question from the group. This is from Kim Vaughn. Did I understand you to say that you are updating the Pakistan credential information availability? Did someone say something about Pakistan?
It was Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan, and that's what Anne has completed the research on that and presented. We've approved it, and it's scheduled to be posted in December.
And actually, I would love for Anne to just say a couple of words about Uzbekistan and what prompted that, because there's a lot of cool things happening there.
Sure, I'd love to. Hi, thank you, Melanie. Hi, everyone. ACRO has been involved in some exciting things that are going on in Uzbekistan lately. Uzbekistan is a country where the concept of internationalization is coming to the fore at this time. The president of Uzbekistan has decreed, in conjunction with the UNESCO 2030 education goals, that Uzbekistan will have a higher education 2030 program. And one of the components of the program will be that Uzbekistan will adopt a credit system in higher education. Uzbekistan does not currently have a credit system in their higher education programs. So one thing that Uzbekistan does have in terms of internationalization is a number of branch campuses of foreign universities. So universities that are not Uzbek universities are operating in Uzbekistan, representing countries in Europe, countries in Asia, a variety of different programs available to students in Uzbekistan, where they actually study at the campus, the branch campus in Uzbekistan, and then receive the academic credential of the university in the country, from the country that runs the program. And one of the newest ones is Webster University, a U.S. university headquartered in St. Louis, that has just started a program in Tashkent, Uzbekistan, the capital city. So because of this idea of starting a credit program, Webster invited ACRO to give a conference or a workshop talking about the U.S. credit system and the concepts involved in the U.S. credit system, how it functions in terms of student mobility, in terms of its role in quality assurance, and then to give some examples to the Uzbek audience of credit systems from other countries that are actually operating in Uzbekistan at the foreign branches. So Melanie, Julia Funaki, Tom Green, who works with ACRO Consulting, and I participated in turned out to be a 4-hour conference, or we called it a conference or a workshop on credit systems. And that took place on October 7th or 8th, depending on where you were in the world at that time. It was early morning for our colleagues in Uzbekistan and middle of the night for us in the United States. The audience was representatives from the Ministry of Higher Education and rectors and vice rectors from higher education institutions, people who work in departments with international students, and some faculty members, some instructors. So we had about a total of 300 people on the webinar or on the Zoom conference over the course of the 4 hours that we were involved. The sessions that we ACRO staff gave were pre-recorded. We spoke in English, and then translators translated the material into Russian and Uzbek for the audience. And then there were the breakout groups and discussions that took place both in Russian and in Uzbek. And there seemed to be quite a bit of enthusiasm for the workshop. It seemed that people were very interested in learning more about what credit systems are all about and talking about what kind of a credit system might be the way to go for Uzbekistan. So Uzbekistan is really growing as far as the number of higher education institutions being established there, public institutions and private. And from the time we started working on this project in summer, let's say June, July, until the date when we actually gave the conference, there were 5 new institutions that had opened. So we were continuously updating the information. So all of this material is what I will be updating for the EDGE profile on Uzbekistan. And then save the date on December 3rd. I think it's a Thursday, December 3rd. We'll have a free ACRO webinar giving updates on Uzbekistan, and especially with a focus on how their goal of internationalization is creating changes in their system. So there are some changes in the elementary and secondary system. There are changes in higher education, lots of new institutions, new grading system. So lots of new information that I'm working on to post to EDGE and then to share on the webinar on December 3rd.
Thanks so much, Anne. That's great. And Anne is an amazing researcher. So if you have any interest, this will be a great country update webinar. You should definitely tune in.
Yes.
We have a little bit of time left, and I want to get to, there are at least 2 more questions and possibly another one in the chat that I need to suss out. One is a question about India. Crystal Little asks, I have a credential question in regard to a 4-year BA honors in India. I haven't seen anything in EDGE about this. Would this be considered equivalent to a US BS or only transfer work? Who wants to talk about the 4-year BA honors in India?
I'll give it a go.
Thanks, Rob.
Real quick, Crystal. First of all, I'm surprised. I've seen some 4-year BS degrees, which traditionally hadn't been the case. When we always teach India at the ACRO Institutes, it's always 3-year BA, BS, or BCom for BCommerce, and the 4-year degrees are the engineering and tech degrees and some scientific degrees. So a BA 4-year is rather an odd duck. So my first response would be to say, make sure it's 4 years full time after HSC, after higher secondary certificate. One way to do that is 2 ways to do it. One is if you've got access to the Indian University's handbook, which is a great, though somewhat expensive resource, that will give you the universities, their degrees, and their duration and their eligibility and the requirements for entering them. Second way to do it, of course, is to go to the school website, click on the degree and see what its duration is. There was a moment when the University of Delhi attempted to have a 4-year bachelor's degree, and the University Grants Commission, the UGC, shut them down almost immediately. I think things are starting to open up again. We see in Pakistan, for example, a number of the business degrees, at first at private institutions, but now at the public ones as well, that are in business that are clearly 4 years and use credits, 130, 132, 120. But India, I haven't really seen that yet. So the question would be, what school are we talking about and what degree?
Excellent point, Robert. Wouldn't it be interesting if this is one of those that came out of that short period where the 4-year degree happened? That would be interesting. I think, Melanie, did you ask for a sample of this document for us? If Crystal has the document and can't be redacted, it'd be great for us to see it. Thank you.
Yes. And as a point, anyone who has a credential that they would like to share that's unusual, that they think that this is really something that we don't have a copy of or haven't seen, we're always willing to sort of take a look at that because we love to see unusual samples, but they need to be redacted. We
Yes.
need to not have personally identifiable information on any credentials that you share. So if you have something like that and you want to email us, you can email edge@acro.org, and we'll talk you through the process of how to redact your credentials so that we're.
And if I could just add to what Robert said, and his guidance on that was spot on, because knowing if this program really is a 4-year part-time or a 3-year full-time, the BA honors typically in the 3-year program is more concentration and specialty. So if a person is just studying a BA general for 3 years, there is no specialty, but if they go into the 3-year BA honors, there is a specialty, there is a focus. So just wanted to make that clear. So it's going to be important for us to be sure that this is a full-time or a part-time 4-year program.
Excellent. There is a follow-up to the question about the Indian piece, and then I would like to get. I've got another couple of good ones here. This is from Jackie Hamilton. Robert, when you talk about the 3-year bachelor's degree from India, when Acro Edge evaluates Indian transcripts, do you count backlogs?
Backlogs, I'm not sure what we mean by that. What we're basing it on is very simply a year counting methodology that says, okay, in India, primary, secondary education is 12 years. 10 years, you have your secondary school certificate. And at 12 years, you have the higher secondary certificate examination. And then you go on to university and you choose the discipline you want. And what we traditionally have seen is that the Bachelor of Arts, the Bachelor of Science, and Bachelor of Commerce have all been 3-year degrees, while the Bachelor of Engineering, the Bachelor of Technology, and then some of the health professions degrees are all 4 years and sometimes even more than that. So I'm not sure, Crystal, what exactly you mean by backlog, but it's just a simple year counting. And what I guess the key to your first initial question would be simply that is the official duration of this degree 4 years. Remember, we're not interested in how long it took the individual to get the degree. We want to know what is the official length and duration of this degree when pursued full time. And if it's 3 years, then it's 3 years. If it's 4 years, wow, we found something new.
Excellent. So I have a question that I suspect is going to end up going to Anne. So Anne, listen carefully.
Okay.
Does anyone have experience with a distinguished juris diploma, MA degree? We've received a degree from the following school, Al Jamia Saifia. I should have asked Jasmine to pronounce that one because I think I butchered it. This coursework was completed in India, but the school has campuses in India, Kenya, and Pakistan. We've not found it and can't find it to be accredited in any of these countries. Has anyone heard of this?
What was the name of the credential again, Melanie, please?
A distinguished jurist diploma. And there was an MA degree in the translation, but the degree certificate looks like Arabic. Have you heard of anything like this, or is this?
I have to say that without the details of the documentation, the name of the school, this sounds like it needs some research. And as you mentioned before, my last name is König in German, which means king, which makes me the queen, and I am the queen of research. So
she is, boy. Yeah.
But I would say that I would be happy if the person who's asking the question would like to share copies of the documents. As Melanie said, redact all the bio info and send me the information about whatever you know, whatever information you have. I'd be very happy to look at it.
All right. Thanks. Appreciate that. Jasmine, did you have something to say? It looked like maybe you, no? Okay.
No.
Excellent. All right. Then we have a question who's asking, someone who's asking for information or contact regarding verification in Palestine. Any advice on verification in Palestine?
You know, we do have an author who is doing the country profile and the credentials for Palestine, Hani Arafat. And I could reach out to Hani if Leslie would like to email us her contact information, and we could put her in touch with Hani so that he may have access, because he is doing the research on the region.
Excellent, thank you. All right, and let's see. I have one question that came up, and I suspect this is a more technical question, so I'll take it, and it's in the chat, but it's asking about logging into Edge and questions about how to save your login in Edge. And I will say first that when you log into Edge, you are logging in to a web application. And so that web application, its ability to save your login information is 100% tied to the settings that you have in your browser. So what I might suggest is two things. One is to check your browser settings to make sure if you want it to save, that you have it saving your password information. And so that's something we can probably think about creating a little video for at some point in the future. But if you ask your institutional tech support person about how to do that, they can probably show you if you haven't, because that's not part of the Edge product. It's completely built into your browser. And so your browser should be able to save that information for you. Right. And I do not see any other questions. So that might be all. I'm going to double check because I see some chatter. And I think we
Melanie, excuse me, Melanie, this is Ann speaking. Did we mention anything about? Yeah, oh, great. I finally made it in. Hi, everyone. Sorry it took so
there
long.
you are.
I just wanted to ask if anyone had asked about Ukraine, or we wanted to bring that up.
We haven't, but please go ahead.
Should we go ahead and discuss that, Jasmine?
Yes, of course, go ahead.
Okay, great. There was a question this morning on the ACRO International Activities listserv about Ukraine grading, and it referenced the grading scale information that's shown in Edge for Ukraine. And I took a look at that and I thought, oh, we have a typo in that. So we want to make everyone aware of a typo in the grading section of Ukraine. And let me see, I just had it up on my screen here. It's a pretty significant typo for which we must apologize. In the country of Ukraine, for the grade that is a pass-fail grade, where there's no actual qualitative grade, we translate it as either pass or credit or test. You won't see one of the verbal grades of excellent, good, or satisfactory. In the Edge profile, it's mistakenly has a U.S. equivalence of fail, and it should be pass. That's just a clear typo. So again, the grade that is the ungraded grade of pass, which translates to pass in Ukrainian, could be translated in English as either pass or credit or test. That is equivalent to a U.S. grade of pass, not fail. I hope that's clear to everyone. And Terry Reed from Wichita State University, if you're on the call today, feel free to email one of us or email me for an explanation about that. But there was a thread going about Ukrainian transcripts, and Peggy Bell Hendrickson had given a lot of information that was helpful. Terry responded with another question, and she said, well, Acro Edge says it's a fail. And we're very sorry. It actually is a pass, and we will be fixing that straight away. So I wanted to clarify that for everyone.
And in
And let
case
me
you
add to
couldn't
that.
see, Terry is on the call and she says, thank you.
Yes.
Oh, great, Terry. Sorry.
Tell Terry that I
To
also
everyone.
just emailed her
Sorry,
with that
sorry,
same answer.
yeah.
And just a sort of a follow-up to Anne, what it sort of is, it's a derivative of the old Soviet model. Well, Ukraine was still part of the USSR, would have used what, the Russians were doing, which other Soviet republics were probably doing. And that in the case of Russia, it was zashot, which was a satisfactory pass that doesn't carry a qualitative equivalency. We have a beautiful explanation of that in Edge Russia. We have a very bad explanation of that in Ukraine, which will soon, as Anne says, be fixed.
Yes.
Right, and basically it means that in that particular subject, there wasn't a final exam, that the student's assessment was based on what we call continuous assessment throughout the course, quizzes or whatever assignments had to be done, but there was no final exam that was graded at the end of the subject. So it's a pass on a pass-fail basis, should not be counted into a GPA calculation, just a straight pass. So we'll fix that one. And Terry, great. I'm glad we could straighten that out for you.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I think we have to call it time. We are out of time.
Wow.
Michael, if you could advance to the next slide. I want to make sure that those who are on the call are aware that Acro does have small research grants of up to $1,000 to take on research projects like some of the things that we talked about in this call. And so if you have a research project that you would like to pitch, I would encourage you to go on the Acro website and apply for one of the Gloria R. Nathanson Research Fund grants. More information is on the website, acro.org, but these funds are available, and your research could be funded and also would be published. So we hope that you will apply. Next slide. I want to thank this group of folks immensely. The International Education Standards Council, or the IESC, volunteers countless hours of their time to work through these credential questions. These are not paid folks, guys. They all have full-time jobs, and they work hard to give this information back to the field and to share with you all. And so I want to thank their time, their effort, their hard work, and their excellent credentialed detective brains for all of the work that they do. Next slide. I want to also make sure that you know how to stay in touch. So stay informed on international activities at Acro. You can join the EDGE email list, and that is on the EDGE website. You can join the International Activities Listserv, where you can crowdsource with your colleagues on lots of issues and find mistakes in an EDGE profile, like the grading scale mistake. So keep us honest, guys. This is great. And you can also subscribe to the Acro Connect newsletter, which has all things Acro, including lots of international information. Next slide. We're all working from home, as I know many of you are, and so our calendars are full of virtual events. And so mark your calendars with these upcoming webinars. On October 28th, we'll be talking about evaluating and attracting Pearson BTech and Pearson EdXL students. November 6th, we'll be talking about test optional and implementing holistic review. I know that this is mainly domestic, but we may touch on a few international topics on that one. November 12th, we'll be talking about Cambridge international policies. November 17th, we'll be talking about the IESC fellows and their research and how you could apply to be an IESC fellow. And then on November 24th, we'll have the last user group of the year. Also, we've got 3 things that have just come out we have a new publication on holistic admissions. We have a report on stranded credits and transfer credit, and another on guidance and best practices for closing institutions pertaining to student records. And next slide. Last but not least, I hope that some of you might consider joining us next week for ACRO's first fully virtual meeting. We will be having our Strategic Enrollment Management Conference online October 28th to 30th, and it is going to be fantastic. We have frozen the early bird rate, so we hope that you might come and join us for this first ever fully virtual conference offered by ACRO. Thanks again. I hope to see you next month, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Well,
Bye all.
Bye.